In a quiet little town where everyone knew their neighbors, Sarah and Michael seemed like the perfect couple. Their love story had started in high school when they were just teenagers with big dreams. They fell in love quickly, sharing laughter, over cafeteria lunches and holding hands during late-night walks home. By the time they graduated, they decided to get married, believing nothing could ever come between them. Friends envied their bond, and family members often remarked how lucky they were to find such happiness so early in life. Their cozy house sat at the end of a tree-lined street, surrounded by flower beds that Sarah lovingly tended to every spring. Inside, photos of their happiest moments filled the walls. Wedding portraits, vacations to the beach, and candid shots of Michael laughing as he tried and failed to bake cookies one Christmas Eve. Everything about their life looked idyllic from the outside, but beneath the surface things weren't as flawless as they appeared. Michael had always been ambitious, working long hours at his corporate job while dreaming of climbing the ladder. At first, Sarah admired his drive and supported him wholeheartedly. She took care of the house, cooked meals, and made sure their home was a haven for both of them. But over time, Michael's priorities shifted. He became increasingly distant, spending more time glued to his phone or locked away in his office than enjoying evenings together on the couch. When Sarah tried to talk to him about it, he dismissed her concerns, saying she didn't understand the pressures of his work. Then came the news that changed everything. Sarah was pregnant. For a brief moment, the old spark returned. The two hugged tightly, tears streaming down their faces as they imagined raising a child together. They painted the nursery, picked out tiny outfits, and debated baby names. Yet even amidst this joy, there was tension simmering underneath. Michael grew quieter, often snapping at Sarah over small things like forgetting to take out the trash or leaving dishes in the sink. His frustration built up day by day until it felt like an invisible wall stood between them. Sarah tried her best to keep things light. She cooked Michael's favorite meals, left sweet notes on his desk, and reminded herself that stress from work must be getting to him. But no matter what she did, it never seemed enough. One night, after a particularly rough day, Michael came home late. Dinner was cold, and Sarah admitted she hadn't finished tidying up because she'd been feeling tired. That small confession set off something inside him. What started as a harmless comment about responsibility escalated into a shouting match neither of them could control. As voices echoed through the once peaceful home, Sarah realized something painful. The man she loved, the one who used to hold her hand and promise forever, was slipping away. And though she couldn't see it yet, the cracks in their marriage were about to widen into an unbridgeable chasm. Little did she know, her world was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The argument that night started like so many others had in recent months, over something small and trivial. Sarah had forgotten to fold a pile of laundry, leaving it on the couch instead. It was an innocent mistake, one she would have laughed about just a year ago. But now it felt like every little thing she did or didn't do was under scrutiny. Michael's temper flared instantly. His voice rose louder than usual, filling the house with anger and frustration. "You never think about anyone but yourself," he shouted, pacing back and forth in the living room. "I work all day and I come home to this? How hard is it to keep things together?" Sarah stood frozen, her hands clutching the edge of the counter. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from fear but also from exhaustion. She was 8 months pregnant, carrying not only their child but also the weight of their crumbling relationship. Every insult stung more deeply than the last. "I'm doing my best," she said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm trying, Michael, but you don't even notice anymore." Her words seemed to enrage him further. He stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression cold and unyielding. "Your best isn't good enough," he snapped. "If you can't handle this, maybe you shouldn't be here." Before Sarah could respond, Michael stormed into the bedroom. Moments later, he returned dragging a suitcase behind him. Without hesitation, he began throwing her clothes into it. Sweaters, jeans, shoes, all haphazardly tossed without care. Sarah watched in disbelief, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Was he really kicking her out? Over unfolded laundry? When the suitcase was full, Michael grabbed it by the handle and shoved it toward her. "Here," he said bitterly. "You wanted space? Take it." Shock rooted Sarah to the spot. The man she had loved for years, the father of her unborn child, was standing before her devoid of compassion or empathy. His eyes were hard, his jaw clenched tightly. For the first time, she saw him clearly. Someone who no longer recognized her worth or valued their life together. "Michael, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "We can fix this, let's talk." "There's nothing left to say," he interrupted sharply. Then, without another word, he opened the front door and gestured for her to leave. The cold night air hit Sarah like a slap as she stepped outside, the heavy suitcase dragging against the pavement. She turned back once, hoping he might change his mind, but the door slammed shut behind her. Alone on the curb, with only the dim glow of the streetlights to comfort her, Sarah broke down completely. Tears streamed down her face as reality sank in. She had nowhere to go. Pregnancy made everything harder. Her swollen feet ached from standing too long, and the chill in the air sent shivers through her body. Panic set in as she realized how vulnerable she was. Who could she call? Her parents lived hours away, and most of her friends were busy with their own lives. As minutes ticked by, the quiet suburban street felt eerily empty, amplifying her loneliness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah remembered hearing about a women's shelter nearby. Clutching the suitcase with shaking hands, she started walking, each step heavier than the last. Every car that passed made her feel exposed, judged. She couldn't believe this was happening. Not now, not when she needed stability the most. Dawn approached. Sarah found herself at the shelter's doorstep, exhausted and broken. A kind volunteer greeted her warmly, offering tea and a safe place to rest. For the first time since being thrown out, Sarah allowed herself to breathe. Though her heart still ached, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't face it alone. And deep down, despite the pain, a tiny spark of hope flickered to life, a hope that someday, somehow, she'd find strength again. The women's shelter was nothing like Sarah had imagined. Instead of cold, sterile walls and uncomfortable silence, it buzzed with warmth and life. The moment she stepped inside, a volunteer named Clara greeted her with a gentle smile and guided her to a small but cozy room. It wasn't much, a twin bed, a dresser, and a chair, but after spending the night on edge, it felt like a sanctuary. For the first time in hours, Sarah allowed herself to sit down without fear of judgment or rejection. Clara introduced herself as one of the shelter's coordinators and quickly became a source of comfort for Sarah. A retired nurse with decades of experience helping women in crisis, Clara had an uncanny ability to make people feel seen and heard. She brought Sarah a steaming cup of tea and sat beside her, listening patiently as Sarah poured out her story between sobs. Clara didn't interrupt or offer quick fixes. Instead, she simply nodded, offering soft words of encouragement when needed. By the end of their conversation, Sarah felt a glimmer of relief, like maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Over the next few days, Sarah began adjusting to her new surroundings. The shelter housed several other women, each carrying her own struggles and scars. There was Lisa, a young mother-to-be who had fled an abusive partner. Maria, a grandmother raising her grandchildren after her daughter disappeared. And Jasmine, a college student trying to rebuild her life after escaping a toxic relationship. Despite their different backgrounds, they shared a common bond: resilience. Together, they formed a makeshift family, supporting one another through laughter, tears, and late-night talks. Sarah found solace in these connections. Every morning, the women gathered in the communal kitchen to prepare breakfast. They took turns cooking meals, sharing recipes passed down from their mothers and grandmothers. Sarah especially loved watching Lisa expertly flip pancakes while humming old songs under her breath. These small moments of normalcy helped ground her, reminding her that even in chaos, there was beauty to be found. Clara also encouraged Sarah to attend workshops offered at the shelter. Topics ranged from parenting skills to financial planning, all designed to empower women to regain control of their lives. At first, Sarah hesitated, unsure if she had anything to contribute. But during a creative writing session, she surprised herself by penning a heartfelt letter to her unborn child. As she read it aloud to the group, tears streaming down her face, the room fell silent. Not out of pity, but out of admiration. Her words resonated deeply with the others, sparking conversations about hope, healing, and second chances. As weeks passed, Sarah grew stronger, not just physically but emotionally. With Clara's guidance, she filed for legal separation from Michael and secured temporary financial assistance through spousal support. Though the process was daunting, having someone in her corner made all the difference. Clara taught her how to navigate paperwork and advocate for herself, skills Sarah never realized she possessed. One evening, as Sarah sat outside on the shelter's tiny porch, cradling her growing belly, she reflected on how far she'd come. Just a month ago, she'd been stranded on a curb, convinced her life was over. Now, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known before. Motherhood no longer seemed like a burden but a chance to create something beautiful, a future filled with love, strength, and independence. For the first time in months, Sarah smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally believed she had the power to shape her own destiny. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. And that realization gave her a courage she hadn't felt in years. As Sarah's due date drew closer, the reality of her situation began to weigh heavily on her. The excitement of becoming a mother was undeniable, but it came hand in hand with a flood of worries and fears that kept her awake at night. Would she be able to provide for her child? Could she protect him from the same pain and instability she had endured? And what kind of man would Michael become in their son's life, if he even chose to have one? The shelter offered stability, but Sarah knew it wouldn't last forever. She needed to find a way to stand on her own 2 feet, not just for herself, but for the tiny life growing inside her. Each kick or flutter reminded her of the immense responsibility ahead. Late at night, when the house grew quiet, Sarah would lie awake staring at the ceiling, imagining all the possible futures her baby might face. Some were bright and hopeful, others filled her with dread. One morning, during a routine checkup at the clinic, Sarah broke down in tears while speaking with the midwife. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, clutching her stomach. "What if I fail him? What if I'm not enough?" The midwife, a calm and reassuring woman named Diane, placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," she said softly. "Every step you've taken so far proves that. You left an unsafe situation, found help, and are doing everything you can to prepare for your baby. That's more than many people could say." Her words brought some comfort, but they didn't erase the lingering bitterness Sarah felt toward Michael. He hadn't reached out once since, throwing her out, not a phone call, text, or even an inquiry about her well-being. When legal documents arrived notifying him of the divorce proceedings, his response was cold and dismissive. Through his lawyer, he claimed he couldn't afford to support Sarah financially, despite earning a comfortable salary. It was as if he had wiped his hands clean of any responsibility, leaving her to navigate parenthood alone. Sarah tried to push thoughts of Michael aside, focusing instead on preparing for her baby's arrival. With Clara's encouragement, she attended parenting classes at the shelter, learning how to swaddle, change diapers, and soothe a crying infant. She spent hours poring over baby books borrowed from the local library, determined to soak up every piece of advice she could find. Yet no matter how hard she worked, there were moments when doubt crept back in. How could she possibly manage late-night feedings, doctor visits, and diaper changes without anyone to share the load? To make matters worse, memories of Michael's betrayal haunted her. She replayed their arguments in her mind, dissecting every harsh word and cruel gesture. Sometimes anger surged through her like a tidal wave. Other times sadness overwhelmed her, leaving her curled up in bed, wishing she could turn back time to when things were simpler. But amidst these emotions, something unexpected began to take root: determination. Sarah realized that dwelling on Michael's actions wouldn't change anything. It only drained her energy. Instead, she channeled her frustration into action. She started setting small goals for herself, like organizing the baby's clothes or practicing breathing techniques for labor. With each accomplishment, no matter how minor, she felt a little more in control. Slowly, she began to see herself not as a victim of circumstance, but as someone capable of creating a better future. Still, there were nights when loneliness pressed down on her chest like a heavy weight. During those moments, she allowed herself to cry, to grieve the loss of the life she once dreamed of and the partner she thought she'd have by her side. But after the tears subsided, she reminded herself why she was fighting so hard. Her baby deserved love, safety, and opportunity, things she was determined to give him no matter the cost. By the time her 9th month rolled around, Sarah had transformed in ways she never anticipated. She wasn't just preparing for motherhood, she was rediscovering herself. Though fear still lingered in the corners of her mind, it no longer consumed her. For the first time since being thrown out onto the street, Sarah believed she could handle whatever came next, even if it meant facing the world alone. The day Sarah went into labor, the world seemed to hold its breath. It was early morning and the sun had barely risen when sharp contractions jolted her awake. Her heart raced as she realized this was it, the moment she had been preparing for. Over the past 9 months, with trembling hands, she grabbed her hospital bag and called Clara, who rushed to her side within minutes. Together, they made their way to the hospital, where nurses guided Sarah to a delivery room filled with soft light and calming voices. Hours passed in a blur of pain, exhaustion, and determination. Through every push and cry, Sarah focused on one thing: meeting her baby. And then finally a tiny wail broke through the tension in the room. The nurse placed a squirming bundle in Sarah's arms, a perfect little boy with rosy cheeks and delicate fingers that curled instinctively around hers. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she gazed at him, overwhelmed by a love so powerful it took her breath away. In that moment, everything else faded away: the betrayal, the fear, the loneliness. All that mattered was the fragile life cradled against her chest. She named him Noah, a name she'd chosen long before his birth because it meant rest or comfort. Holding him felt like both, a reminder that peace could exist even after chaos. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah settled into a rhythm of motherhood. Late-night feedings and diaper changes became second nature, though they left her exhausted. Yet every smile Noah gave her, every coo and giggle, made the sleepless nights worthwhile. For the first time in years, Sarah felt truly whole. But survival wasn't just about loving her son, it was also about providing for him. Living at the shelter had given Sarah stability, but she knew she needed more than temporary help. Determined to build a better future, she revisited an old dream she'd set aside years ago: graphic design. Back in high school, Sarah had loved creating art, sketching logos and posters for school events. Now, inspired by Clara's encouragement, she decided to turn that passion into a career. With the shelter's support, Sarah enrolled in online courses to finish her degree. Balancing coursework with caring for Noah was no easy task, but she found joy in rediscovering her creativity. She spent hours designing logos for fictional companies, experimenting with colors and fonts until her vision came to life. Slowly, her confidence grew. By the time she completed her program, she had built a small portfolio showcasing her talent. Clara helped Sarah take the next step by connecting her with local businesses looking for affordable design work. Her first client was a bakery owned by a kind woman named Rachel, who needed a logo for her shop. When Sarah presented her final design, a whimsical cupcake surrounded by playful swirls, Rachel was thrilled. Word spread quickly, and soon Sarah had a steady stream of clients eager to hire her. From coffee shops to yoga studios, her designs brought brands to life, earning her praise and referrals. As her freelance business picked up, Sarah began saving money to move out of the shelter and into her own apartment. It wasn't glamorous, a modest 1-bedroom unit above a bookstore, but it was hers. Every corner reflected her personality, from the hand-painted mural of trees in Noah's nursery to the cozy reading nook where she worked late into the night. For the first time since being thrown out onto the street, Sarah felt a sense of ownership over her life. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Could she keep going like this? Was she doing enough for Noah? But whenever uncertainty threatened to overwhelm her, she looked at her son's bright eyes and remembered why she fought so hard. She wasn't just building a home. She was creating a foundation of strength and resilience for them both. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, Sarah faced it with hope, knowing she had already overcome the impossible. Just as Sarah was beginning to settle into her new life, a phone call shattered the fragile peace she had worked so hard to build. It was Michael's sister, Emily, her voice trembling with urgency. "Sarah, you need to know what happened," she said without preamble. "Michael was in a car accident last night. He's alive, but it's bad." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the chest. For a moment she couldn't breathe, her mind struggling to process the news. Michael, the man who had thrown her out onto the street, who had shown no remorse or responsibility, was now fighting for his life. Guilt and confusion swirled inside her. She wanted to hang up, to shut out the pain of hearing his name again. But something stopped her. "Tell me more," she said quietly, clutching the edge of her kitchen counter for support. Emily explained that Michael had been driving home late at night when his car skidded off the road and collided with a tree. The impact left him severely injured. Broken bones, internal damage, and spinal trauma that left him partially paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors weren't sure if he'd ever walk again. Worse still, he required constant care, which meant round-the-clock assistance either in a rehabilitation center or at home. As Emily spoke, Sarah felt torn between anger and empathy. This was the same man who had abandoned her, who hadn't cared enough to check on her or their unborn child. Yet hearing about his suffering stirred something deep within her, a mix of sadness and reluctant compassion. Could she really turn her back on him now, even after everything? Over the next few days, Sarah wrestled with conflicting emotions. Friends and family reached out, urging her to forgive Michael and help him recover. "He's Noah's father," they reminded her. "You can't just abandon him." Others argued that helping him would only reopen old wounds, warning her not to let guilt cloud her judgment. Even Clara, who had always supported Sarah, advised caution. "You've come so far," Clara said gently during one of their talks. "Don't lose sight of your strength now. Helping Michael doesn't mean sacrificing yourself or Noah's future." But Sarah couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this was a turning point, a chance to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. Was she someone who held grudges, letting bitterness define her? Or could she rise above the hurt and extend grace, even to someone who didn't deserve it? Finally, after days of sleepless nights and endless debates with herself, Sarah made a decision. She would visit Michael, not because she owed him anything, but because she needed closure. If she walked away now, she feared the resentment would fester, poisoning her newfound happiness. So with Noah safely cared for by a trusted babysitter, Sarah drove to the rehabilitation center where Michael was recovering. When she entered his room, the sight of him took her aback. Gone was the confident, self-assured man she once knew. In his place lay a broken figure hooked up to machines, his face pale and drawn. Their eyes met, and for the first time in months, Sarah saw vulnerability in him, real, raw emotion that cut through her defenses. "I'm sorry," Michael whispered, his voice hoarse and barely audible. Tears welled up in his eyes as he struggled to speak. "I messed everything up. I didn't realize how much I lost until it was too late." For a long moment, Sarah simply stared at him, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to lash out, to remind him of every cruel word and selfish act, but another part, a quieter, stronger part, knew revenge wouldn't heal her wounds. Instead, she chose her words carefully. "I'm here because I want Noah to grow up knowing forgiveness," she said firmly. "But don't mistake this for reconciliation. If you truly regret what you've done, prove it. Get the help you need. Not just physically, but emotionally. And maybe, just maybe, we can find a way forward for Noah's sake." With those words, Sarah stood up and left the room, her head held high. She didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let Michael's accident derail the life she had built. Whatever happened next, she vowed to stay true to herself and to the promise she had made to her son. The weeks following Sarah's visit to the rehabilitation center were a whirlwind of emotions. Michael's apology had been unexpected, and though it didn't erase the pain he'd caused, it planted a seed of possibility in Sarah's mind. Could Michael truly change? Or was this just another fleeting moment of regret that would fade once he regained some semblance of control over his life? She wrestled with these questions daily, torn between her instincts and her hopes for Noah's future. Michael began attending therapy sessions as part of his recovery, not just physical rehabilitation but also counseling to address the anger and selfishness that had defined much of his behavior. At first, Sarah remained skeptical. She knew how easy it was to say the right things when you were desperate. But slowly, she started noticing small changes. During their occasional phone calls, initiated by Michael, always brief and awkward, he sounded different. His voice carried less defensiveness, more humility. He asked about Noah, not in a possessive way, but with genuine curiosity. "What is he like?" Michael asked one day. "Does he smile a lot?" Sarah hesitated before answering. "He loves tummy time," she said cautiously. "And yes, he smiles all the time. It's like sunshine." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Michael spoke again, his tone was softer. "I wish I could see him." That request caught Sarah off guard. Letting Michael back into their lives, even in the smallest way, felt risky. Yet, deep down, she knew Noah deserved to know his father, provided Michael proved he was ready to be someone worth knowing. Still, Sarah set firm boundaries. Any contact between Michael and Noah would happen only under her supervision, and only after consistent proof of effort on Michael's part. To his credit, Michael respected those boundaries. He continued working hard in therapy, confronting years of unresolved issues that had fueled his toxic behavior. One afternoon, during a meeting facilitated by his counselor, he admitted something painful. "I thought success meant having power over everything. My job, my marriage, even my feelings, even my losing control. It scared me. And instead of facing that fear, I pushed everyone away." Hearing this admission gave Sarah a glimpse of the man Michael might have been if he hadn't let pride and insecurity take over. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it helped her understand why he had acted the way he did. Understanding didn't mean forgiveness. It simply meant seeing him as human, flawed, and struggling just like anyone else. Eventually, Sarah agreed to let Michael visit Noah under strict conditions. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a quiet park with wide open spaces where Noah could crawl freely while Sarah kept a watchful eye. Michael arrived in a wheelchair looking nervous but determined. As he watched Noah play, his expression softened. For the first time since the accident, Sarah saw glimpses of the man she used to love, the one who had laughed and dreamed alongside her. "Can I hold him?" Michael asked hesitantly. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She carefully placed Noah in Michael's arms, keeping a close distance in case anything went wrong. To her surprise, Michael handled the baby gently, cradling him with care. Tears welled up in his eyes as he whispered, "Hey there, buddy. I'm your dad." Noah gurgled happily, completely unaware of the weight of the moment. Watching them together stirred conflicting emotions in Sarah. On one hand, she felt a pang of sadness, for the family they could have been, for the years they'd lost. On the other hand, she felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, Michael was capable of becoming the father Noah needed. But Sarah wasn't naive. She reminded herself that redemption wasn't a single act. It was a journey. Michael still had a long road ahead of him, both physically and emotionally, and while she was willing to support him in small ways for Noah's sake, she made it clear that their relationship would never return to what it once was. "You've got a second chance," Sarah told Michael firmly after the visit. "Don't waste it. Take responsibility for your actions and keep working on yourself. That's the only way this can work." Michael nodded, his face serious. "I will," he promised. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't let you down." As Sarah walked away from the park, pushing Noah in his stroller, she felt a strange mix of relief and resolve. She couldn't predict what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer afraid of Michael, or of the choices she had made. Whatever happened next, she would face it with courage, guided by love for her son and faith in her own strength. Months passed, and Sarah's life continued to evolve in ways she never could have imagined. She had moved into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment, brightened by sunlight streaming through large windows and filled with the laughter of her toddler, Noah. The walls were adorned with colorful artwork, some pieces created by Sarah herself during late-night design sessions, others painted by Noah with chubby fingers and boundless enthusiasm. Their home wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, a testament to resilience, creativity, and love. Sarah's graphic design business had flourished beyond her wildest dreams. What began as small freelance projects blossomed into a thriving agency. Her talent for crafting unique, eye-catching designs earned her clients from across the country. Local businesses loved her work so much that they referred her to others, spreading her reputation far and wide. With steady income coming in, Sarah hired an assistant to help manage her growing workload, allowing her to spend more time with Noah. Balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship wasn't easy, but every challenge felt worth it when she saw the pride in Noah's eyes as he watched his mom create magic on her computer screen. Meanwhile, Michael's journey toward redemption remained ongoing. After months of intense therapy and rehabilitation, he gained enough independence to live on his own, though he still relied on caregivers for certain tasks. He kept his promise to Sarah, taking full responsibility for his recovery and striving to become a better version of himself. Though their relationship remained distant, Michael occasionally visited Noah under Sarah's supervision. These visits weren't frequent, but they were meaningful. Moments where Michael tried to build a connection with his son through simple activities like reading stories or playing with blocks. Noah, now a curious and energetic toddler, seemed unfazed by the complexities of his parents' past. To him, Michael was simply Dada, a friendly figure who brought toys and made funny faces. Sarah marveled at how effortlessly children forgave, how they approached life with open hearts. Watching Noah interact with Michael stirred mixed emotions within her. Painful memories mingled with cautious optimism. But she reminded herself that this arrangement was about giving her son a chance to know both sides of his story. One crisp autumn afternoon, Sarah stood on the porch of her apartment sipping tea and watching Noah take his first wobbly steps across the grassy courtyard below. His tiny legs trembled with effort, but determination shone in his bright eyes. Each step brought squeals of delight from Sarah, who clapped enthusiastically. When Noah finally reached her, throwing his arms around her legs, she scooped him up and kissed his forehead, overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they shared. As she held him close, Sarah reflected on how far she'd come. From the cold curb where Michael had abandoned her to the warmth of her new home, every step of her journey had shaped her into someone stronger, braver, and more compassionate. The pain of betrayal hadn't disappeared entirely. It lingered, in quiet moments, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it served as a reminder of what she had overcome and the strength she carried within. Michael, too, had transformed. While he would always bear the scars of his mistakes, both physical and emotional, he had learned to face them head-on. He attended parenting classes, read books about raising children, and sought advice from counselors on how to be present in Noah's life without overstepping boundaries. Though their bond would never resemble a traditional family dynamic, Sarah appreciated his efforts. For Noah's sake, she hoped Michael's progress would continue. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. Life hadn't turned out the way she once envisioned, but perhaps that was a blessing in disguise. Through heartbreak and hardship, she had discovered her true self, a woman capable of creating beauty out of chaos, of finding joy even in the darkest moments. And as she looked down at Noah, giggling and reaching for her hand, she knew one thing for certain. Their future was bright, built on a foundation of love, resilience, and endless possibility.